Hello, Rebel, and welcome back to my life. Let's talk about the differences between some various fan cultures, shall we? So a few weeks ago, John Boyega did an interview in GQ, and I really recommend you read it. In it, he talks about not only his participation in the Star Wars franchise, but about fandom in general and race in general from his perspective. Race has had a big impact for John Boyega, like any black man existing in this world, but particularly being thrust into such a broad view and such a limelight that it's impossible not to have that factor weigh very heavily upon him. Some people don't know this or chose to forget, but the instant the first trailer for The Force Awakens came out, John Boyega started getting racist hate from the entire Star Wars fandom and people all around the globe. And from Boyega's perspective, and honestly in a way that's very obvious to anybody who is really paying attention, that severely and negatively impacted the way that he and his character were portrayed and the way that they progressed in the latest trilogy of Star Wars films. There's this really weird difference between some fandoms, and I hate to sound like I'm oversimplifying it, but I really do feel like there's a very clear delineating line between the way that fandoms act when those fandoms are primarily male-dominated and male-focused, and when those fandoms are primarily female-dominated and female-focused. Actually, a more accurate dividing line would probably be between fandoms that are straight cis male-focused and fandoms that are not straight cis male-focused. Now, of course, it has to be acknowledged that there is a huge portion of the Star Wars fandom that is not straight cis males. It's just that they have been very loud in the fandom, let's just say that, and to a degree, you can see the way that the creators of the franchise continue to direct their decisions based on that demographic. And as a result, it has become an important part of the self-assigned nerd identity of a lot of straight cis males in the world, and in the Star Wars fandom in particular. Now, in Star Wars fandom, for a very, very long time, your measure of devotion to the fandom, the measure to which you could find respect from other fans, was your knowledge of and expertise with canon. You were respected for knowing facts from canon. You were respected for knowing which things were canon and which things were canon adjacent, but maybe not necessarily confirmed, and which things were extra canon and therefore should be disregarded. Funnily enough, though Star Wars is one of the biggest fandoms of all time, it is not one of the biggest categories of fan fiction. There is Star Wars fan fiction out there, but there was never the same fan fiction craze that there was for Star Trek, for Harry Potter, or other franchises that frankly just have not been as big as Star Wars in the 4 decades since it existed. And what fan fiction there was primarily dominated by non-straight cis dudes. There's a lot, probably a disturbing amount of Anakin and Obi-Wan fan fiction. If you just go searching through AO3, there's a lot of it. The point of all this is that the fandom around Star Wars for a very long time has been dominated by straight cis guys, mostly straight cis white guys. And then here comes John Boyega, the first face we see in the newest iteration of Star Wars. That was seen as extremely threatening to a lot of Star Wars fans. They felt like their toy was being taken away, even though it wasn't. Like, we can all be clear about that, right? Their toy was not being taken away. The original Star Wars films are all there. You can still go watch them. They haven't changed, other than the way George Lucas changed them like 6 times when he didn't need to. But that's probably a contributing factor to that was the Disney Corporation's decision to remove the Star Wars extended universe. All that stuff was now considered non-canon. Realize what that means to people who, as stated, based their whole fandom identity on how much canon they knew and what they knew was canon and was not canon and all this sort of stuff. All this time and effort they'd put into it, thrown out the window like that. And while I am trying to acknowledge the ways in that could make somebody feel alienated, let's also realize that that's a problem of extreme privilege, right? Okay. And related to this in particular, another big problem with the Star Wars fandom is that because it had been so based on the extended canon up to that point, the fandom didn't have a lot of practice with acknowledging contradictory canon, or specifically headcanon, and the fandom side of creating and collaborating on canon. There were no excellent and universally recognized Star Wars headcanons or fanfics out there that like everybody kind of knew about and was a major influence on it because all of that stuff was what the extended universe was there to do. The Star Wars fandom never had the experience, as the Harry Potter fandom did, of having the creative force behind the actual art itself come out and say, hey, these things are not canon. And having the whole fandom collectively turn to them and say, fuck you, yes it is. Other fandoms have a tendency to love and validate headcanon. And I'm talking again about the big franchises, Star Trek, Harry Potter. These have fandom as an integral part of the culture since the beginning. Fan creations are lauded and celebrated. You are allowed to believe whatever you want. There will always be shipping wars, there will always be arguments, but for the most part, the fan culture is pretty welcoming and just being like, hey, do what you want to do. We all have fun playing in the same sandbox. The Star Wars fandom had nothing like that. And so it's easy to see why that would be one factor, and there are other factors. Read just plain old racial bias for why the moment he appeared on that screen, in that trailer, in movie theaters across the country, Boyega just got hammered. And his character was progressively sidetracked more and more as the trilogy went on. And like, everybody was disappointed in that. I was disappointed in that. I was disappointed in many things about the new trilogy, but that's not what this video is about. Anyway, I'm a Star Wars fan, but I'm not some major person in the fandom scene. I don't run a Star Wars channel. I have no influence in this sphere. But if I've learned anything from existing in various fandom spaces over the years, and if I were to give advice to some prospective Star Wars fan out there, well, I'd say a few things. First, your fandom is what you make it. You have a favorite headcanon, a way that you wish things had gone or think that they should have gone in the movies, the comics, whatever. You're allowed to have that, and it's valid. If the canon that was produced leaves you feeling a certain type of way, and that feeling is a negative feeling, you don't have to accept canon. We're actually allowed to just say, no, I don't accept that. Although this is not to be confused with then turning around and like petitioning that the movie or series be remade. This is not the same thing as that. But with that said, and keeping point number one in mind, when new people show up and want to participate in the fandom and want to be part of this thing that you've based so much of your identity around, that's not a bad thing. Toys are not being taken away. You're not losing anything that you already had or that you already liked about the original creation. New people are allowed to show up, and the creators behind this thing that you love, they're allowed to cater to the new people as well. Like if you just want to do a straight up tally of it, we've already got 6 whole films about straight white guy Skywalkers. So maybe let's wait until those movies are outnumbered before we start complaining about things being taken away from us. And that is all I've got for you today, Rebel. An extra special shout out to my supporters on Patreon who make this and every video on my channel possible. If you want to be one of those awesome and incredibly attractive individuals, click on the Patreon link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Friday. Bye!